Anakin spoke highly of you.
We have to do what's right, regardless of our personal feelings.
I bet your master found you difficult at times.
Anakin never got to finish my training. I walked away from him, just like I walked away from Sabine. I started hearing whispers.
Ahsoka.
Anakin, I won't leave you. Not this time.
Then you will die.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. I got a lot of requests to do an Ahsoka video for her backstory during Star Wars Rebels, the Clone Wars. This will mostly be through the lens of her changing relationship with Anakin Skywalker and then with him after he became Darth Vader, because there are so many Anakin Skywalker references in the trailers. A lot of you also didn't watch all the Star Wars Rebels episodes and the Clone Wars episodes, so I'll explain the important parts of that. Just in general, though, Hayden Christensen will be very important as both Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader to the Ahsoka series, so it's important to know their backstory together. Why their relationship is so fundamental to her character and what she's doing during the Ahsoka episodes, and how it informs her character. If you're new to the channel, I'll be doing episode videos for Ahsoka when it starts. Be sure to subscribe to get everything. I'll do some special giveaways during those. I've still got some cool Star Wars stuff sitting around that I want to give away too. If you did not watch the Clone Wars or the Star Wars Rebels episodes, Ahsoka Tano was created by George Lucas and Dave Filoni specifically for the Clone Wars. George Lucas wanted to give Anakin Skywalker a Padawan and someone for younger viewers to follow because Anakin had grown older. Like, younger people watched Anakin grow up through the prequels. Now they wanted another younger character that people could rally around. He also wanted to give Anakin Skywalker a Padawan to show his character development, and even though he hadn't attained the rank of Jedi Master yet, and typically the Council only let Jedi Masters have apprentices, there were exceptions in the past. The in-universe reason why Yoda chose to give Anakin a Padawan was to alleviate his fears and inability to let go of loved ones like his mother, and Yoda believed that by becoming a teacher to Ahsoka, he would develop emotionally and understand that his excessive bonding to those that he cared about was unnecessary. Yoda also knew that ultimately Ahsoka would graduate to the rank of full Jedi Knight and eventually leave him to go out on her own. He hoped that the process would help Anakin mature. The reason why it was Ahsoka Tano in particular that he chose for this was because of her incredible skill. As a Jedi youngling at the temple, she was on an accelerated program and ready to become a Padawan much sooner than normal, just like Anakin Skywalker had been. Also in the background, the Clone Wars had started and they needed all the Jedi they could get in the field, so Yoda wanted to push Ahsoka to the next stage in her training as fast as possible, hoping that it would also help her mature a little, like he believed that both Ahsoka and Anakin would help each other become better people and better Jedi. The only other Jedi Master that she'd been close to up to this point was Plo Koon. He was the one who found her on her home planet and brought her into the Jedi Order as a child. They covered the events of her early life during the newer Star Wars Tales of the Jedi episodes. Before Plo Koon showed up, she'd also had an encounter with a rogue former Jedi imposter pretending to be from the Order, trying to trick her into leaving so that he could use her as his own personal weapon. Ahsoka saw him coming from a mile away, but developed trust issues because of that plague her until present day. There are very few people that she actually grows close to, including the characters during Star Wars Rebels, which we'll see in live action, like the crew of the Ghost, people like Anakin Skywalker. She eventually became close to Obi-Wan Kenobi, but still very few people overall. That's why you see Ahsoka in present day being such a loner. Initially, when they first met, Anakin Skywalker didn't want anything to do with her and just thought of her as an inconvenience, eventually going full 180 on her, both of them growing very close, exactly what Yoda did not want to happen. They both developed very close attachments to each other. Really hoping we get some snips, references during the series at some point. She goes on to have all kinds of adventures with Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi. They grow very close to each other, and then eventually, when she was falsely accused by the Jedi Council and decided to leave the Order permanently, Anakin ultimately felt like he failed her and never forgave himself. She'd also grown close to Obi-Wan Kenobi, but they didn't have quite the relationship that she and Anakin had. So typically when you see memes of the Clone Wars of those characters, it's usually Obi-Wan Kenobi scolding Anakin and Ahsoka for not listening to the Jedi Council's orders. Both she and Anakin as characters just kind of did their own thing regardless of orders given to them, and she's still like that in present day. The final episodes of the Clone Wars are amazing. They were meant to cross over with Revenge of the Sith and sort of tie up all those arcs and explain what happened to everybody during the events of Order 66, particularly Ahsoka's character. How did she escape, and how did she react to Anakin Skywalker turning to the dark side and eventually becoming Darth Vader? During Order 66, she was on her way back after helping free Mandalore from Darth Maul and his Shadow Collective, so she's actually friends with Bo-Katan Kryze. They actually referenced that during Mandalorian Season 3, where she told Grogu, "I've actually known some Jedi in the past." She was talking about Ahsoka Tano.
I knew quite a few Jedi, you know.
The events of Anakin's turn to the dark side happened while they were in hyperspace, so the Emperor gives Order 66, all the clones get it, starts going crazy, killing every Jedi that they can find, and Ahsoka doesn't know exactly what happened, but she senses something terrible happened to the Force because of her connection to Anakin Skywalker, so she just senses the trauma that he's going through. Eventually, she blamed herself for not being there for Anakin when he'd been suffering all these Force visions about the death of Padme, Luke, and Leia. It was his fear that ultimately led him to turn to the dark side and serve the Emperor, hoping that he would teach him how to save them, which he did not. The whole idea is that after she left the Jedi Order, she broke contact with Anakin until she agreed to help free Mandalore. So it was during that time period when they were apart that Anakin started to have those Force visions and started to go a little bit nuts. Ahsoka felt like had she not left him, had she been there, she could have prevented everything that happened. So she blames herself for everything that happened to Anakin, and even though she didn't fully learn that he'd become Darth Vader at that point, the event just completely broke her. The trauma of all of that is one of the reasons why she refused to train Grogu in present day, even though it seems like she's taken Sabine Wren as her Padawan finally. While Order 66 was going down, some of the clones like Rex, her friends, were able to resist their programming, or they'd remove their control chips, explaining why there are clones during Star Wars Rebels later in the timeline that are still friendly with Ahsoka. In fact, a lot of you have been asking, and there is a good chance that Temuera Morrison will show up in a cameo at some point as an older version of Rex. There was even a small joke about this during The Mandalorian Season 2, where Boba Fett said that he couldn't enter the Imperial base without a helmet. They'd recognize him because he's just another clone and looks exactly like all the others. Like, wait a minute, why is there a clone here? Something's up.
Fett, let's just say they might recognize my face.
Ahsoka survives Order 66 as their ship crashes and leaves behind her remaining lightsaber that Anakin had just given back to her in order to trick the Empire into thinking that she died in the crash too. There's a brief time jump, and then Anakin, who's now fully become Darth Vader in the armor, finds the crash site with a bunch of stormtroopers and her lightsaber, so at the time, he thinks that she died in the crash, and Ahsoka only knew that something terrible had happened to him. She doesn't know that he also survived Order 66 to become Darth Vader, so she thinks that Anakin is dead. There used to be a missing time gap in her timeline for several years before the events of Star Wars Rebels pick up, but they actually just did an Ahsoka book and then Star Wars Tales of the Jedi episodes which cover what she was doing. She winds up going to ground, hiding out in the Outer Rim, kind of doing what you saw Obi-Wan Kenobi doing at the beginning of the Obi-Wan series, not using their Jedi abilities, just trying to hide in the Force so that the Empire and the Inquisitors couldn't find them. Also, she knew about Darth Vader, but didn't know that Anakin had become Darth Vader. She just heard about this Darth Vader figure going around killing all the Jedi. She almost winds up getting caught by an Inquisitor, defeats him, then Bail Organa finds her and convinces her to join the rebellion and help them take down the Empire. This is still before the events of Star Wars Andor and before the events of Star Wars Rebels. She takes the secret identity Fulcrum and starts working with the rebellion as a sort of point of communication between all the disparate rebel cells, and she did that up through the events of Star Wars Rebels and the events of Andor. By the time Star Wars Rebels picks up a few years before A New Hope, she starts openly meeting with the crew of the Ghost, explaining her role as Fulcrum. They start going on missions together, even though she doesn't train Ezra Bridger in the Force. A lot of their missions take them to Jedi temples and sacred Jedi artifacts, so she starts to get Force visions of Anakin Skywalker, sensing that something happened to him, he might have survived, and even though she doesn't get all the information, doesn't put everything together, she starts to get hints that Anakin might have become Darth Vader. She starts to grow closer with the crew of the Ghost, which we're now seeing in live action during the events of The Mandalorian and the Ahsoka series. She grows closer to Ezra Bridger and tells him about her own history as he learns about Anakin Skywalker, Yoda, the other Jedi. Eventually, he does wind up meeting an older version of Obi-Wan Kenobi too, but he doesn't reference Ahsoka, and Ahsoka doesn't reference older Obi-Wan Kenobi on Tatooine. There's still a lot of questions about the continuity there, like did Obi-Wan Kenobi know that Ahsoka was still alive when he was on Tatooine? I think the idea is that he was relatively secluded from what Bail Organa was doing with Ahsoka in the Rebellion. So he probably did not know about Ahsoka, what she was doing during those years on Tatooine. During the events of Star Wars Rebels, there was a huge Darth Maul Ezra Bridger arc where Maul begins to try and slowly bend him to the dark side of the Force. Eventually, the Inquisitors track them down to a Sith temple. Darth Vader learns of their presence from the Inquisitors and arrives to capture or kill them. While they're there, Ahsoka meets Anakin as Darth Vader in the flesh for the first time since the events of Revenge of the Sith, or before the events of Revenge of the Sith. That whole time, all those years, they hadn't ever actually been in the same room together. And at least up to this point, she hadn't confirmed that Darth Vader really was Anakin Skywalker. Her friend had survived. This is probably one of the best scenes in all of Star Wars, like her just coming to the realization of what happened, like it all comes crushing down on her like a ton of bricks. Later, Ezra winds up saving her using the world between worlds and some Jedi time travel trickery, explaining how she missed a few years in the timeline during Rebels. But during the events of the original trilogy, she stayed in the Outer Rim relatively, continuing to act in her role as Fulcrum, helping the Rebels as much as possible. This is sort of the way that Dave Filoni explains why she wasn't around during the original Star Wars movies or during the prequels either. For a little while, they talked about this little girl being Ahsoka, but the timeline isn't right. Ahsoka's a little bit older when the scene is happening in Attack of the Clones, so this could not be her. You have to remember, she wasn't created as a character, like they didn't come up with the idea for Ahsoka till after Revenge of the Sith had come out in theaters. But up to present day, at least canonically, during the events of the original trilogy, she never met Luke or Leia, but once she heard about the hotshot pilot who blew up the Death Star, who's calling himself Luke Skywalker, she instantly realized who it was and that Anakin's children had survived. As far as Dave Filoni has explained, up to present day, she didn't actually meet Luke Skywalker in the flesh until after the events of Return of the Jedi, when he started to create his Jedi Academy on Ossus. That's the planet that this is on. Her scenes with Luke Skywalker during the Book of Boba Fett happen after her cameo scene during The Mandalorian Season 2. We might see Luke Skywalker cameo during Ahsoka, or they'll reference him in some way, because there are so many Anakin Skywalker references in the trailer. Now in present day, during the new episode, she's finally taken on Sabine Wren as a Padawan, but talks about how her trauma over Anakin Skywalker caused her to leave as her master for a time. Then at some point during the series, she runs into Baylan Skoll. In the trailers, we see that he says he knew Anakin when they were both Jedi, part of the Order, and Anakin told him about Ahsoka. Really easy prediction to make that they're including all these Anakin references to set up a Hayden Christensen cameo scene as Force Ghost Anakin Skywalker. Maybe another flashback to young Ahsoka during the Clone Wars. Maybe he'll also have a cameo scene as Darth Vader in some kind of flashback to their rematch fight in the Sith Temple. One of the other reasons why Anakin is so important to the series is to show how she's following the Force in a completely different way than the old Jedi Order, and how she chooses to act as Jedi Master to Sabine Wren. Really hoping that Force Ghost Anakin Skywalker shows up to give her a pep talk at some point in what it means to be a teacher now that things have come full circle for her. To make a Darth Vader reference, she was once the learner, now she is the master, and she has to go through everything that Anakin went through with her when she was younger. Because the way they're playing their relationship being kind of tense is kind of the relationship between Ahsoka and Anakin back in the Clone Wars when she first became his Padawan. As far as I remember, Force Ghost Anakin Skywalker has never actually appeared to Ahsoka before or spoken to her after his death, so this would technically be their first reunion since that Sith Temple fight during Star Wars Rebels. She would have eventually learned about his redemption and what he did trying to kill the Emperor. She believes that he succeeded too, because remember, they don't know that the Emperor survived. So hopefully that just explains a little bit about her timeline during the Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels, and why her relationship with Anakin Skywalker is so special to the new Ahsoka episodes. If you want to watch Star Wars Rebels or the Clone Wars and you didn't before, you don't need to watch every single episode. I would just recommend like the last season of Rebels in some of the final arc of Star Wars The Clone Wars. There's also this whole long relationship that Ahsoka has with Grand Admiral Thrawn going back to Star Wars Rebels. I'll talk more about that in a separate video, otherwise this would turn into like a 4-hour video. There's so much history between all the different characters that goes way back to the Clone Wars. It's super deep. We'll talk about it during my Ahsoka episodes when that starts as the characters show up. There are a lot of characters that they did not include in the Ahsoka trailer, so there'll be some big surprises during the series. Generally expect all the big Star Wars Rebels characters to appear during the episodes at some point. Let me know if you have any big questions about the characters, just in general, or any video requests. Click here for my new Mandalorian Season 4 video and learn what's going on with live-action Cal Kestis, and click here for that brand new Ahsoka trailer with a whole bunch of Easter eggs. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe. This is The Way.